I'm hoping our microphone is good to go. Down in chat, if you could let me know, that'd be great. But welcome into our Thursday night football live stream. Going to break down what you need to know for this slog of a matchup, right? Not exciting. Two subpar teams, and really the weather isn't going to help. It's something we're going to have to touch on. Should mean that we see a little bit more running, perhaps some defenses getting an extra fumble, an extra turnover to that sort of thing. Should be a fun one to break down. So let's go ahead and get this started. And again, I think we're good from the audio side. I'm not getting any feedback from the StreamYard that anything is going wrong. So hopefully we're good there. So let's bring up ESPN, go through some of the injuries. So first and foremost, 2.5-point spread. So believe it or not, Vegas does have this as a relatively competitive game. I think a lot more of that is due to the total rather than the actual quality of both teams, because with PJ Walker at the helm, I mean, clearly, even though it's Marcus Mariota on the other side, the Falcons are the better team here. So, Carolina's at home. They have that going for them. But outside of that, not much else there. I mean, at the running back position, you have Hubbard coming back, but he's still going to be limited due to injury. On the other side, you just have a lot more healthy bodies. I mean, just think about it, like 3-4 running backs that are at full health, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends over there in Atlanta that are all at full steam at this point. You can see from the injury side, right, other than Hubbard, there wasn't really much to speak about. Most of it is defenders, tight ends, offensive linemen that are, on the injury report for this week. But Atlanta by far is the more deep team, right? They have a lot more depth out there, which is great, right? We expect Atlanta to win this game, but that depth is a double-edged sword when it comes to fantasy production, because dealing with the timeshare on both sides, but it's even more of a spread out timeshare for the Falcon side. At wide receiver, there's not really that one alpha male. I mean, I guess Kyle Pitts, right? Drake London would be your number 1 and 2 wide receivers there. But there's not that number one like you have with a DJ Moore, right? On the other side. So while the Falcons, I think, are deserving favorites here, the Carolina Panthers are actually a little bit easier to project, at least in terms of volume. So I think you might see, the Falcons win this handedly. So we're going to go through game scripts here in a little bit. I definitely side towards the Falcons here, but I think that the Carolina Panthers have better fantasy relevant options just because their offense is a little bit more consolidated, and the pricing, and that's the other half of the equation, right? The pricing on Carolina is just so much more flexible. It's so much softer than what you have on the Atlanta side that it makes this an interesting slate. Like, we have to look at it in terms of points per dollar, and a lot of our points per dollar poppers, even in a losing game script, are on the Carolina side. So we'll talk through some of that. But in terms of injuries, Chuba Hubbard is going to play. That is the last report that we got. So I have him projected in, which was something that I had early this morning. So not a lot had to change there. And outside of that, not many injuries. From the weather perspective, and this is an important one to touch on here, it looks nasty, right? There's the outer bands of Hurricane Nicole, which, by the way, did nothing around here. It was pretty much just like a bad thunderstorm. It wasn't pretty much anything to worry about. A little bit east here, like 2-3 miles, different story, right? They had storm surge, that sort of thing. But inland, it wasn't an issue. And up here in Carolina, you're looking at like a 60 to 70% chance of rain the entire time. So that's the main factor. Also winds of like 12 to 25 miles an hour. Let's see, what is it closer to, like 10, right? Around like halftime, third quarter, still 13 to 25 miles an hour, a 60% chance of rain. And all day, it's been on and off rain. So it's wet up there. The field is going to be soggy. If they're playing in a downpour, which is the type of rain they're going to see if it's raining during play here, that's going to be a little bit worrisome in terms of like turnovers. Defenses could be a little bit more viable in that sort of situation. And downfield passing, right? You have to start to question that during some of these downpours. So you can see it's not 100%, right? It's not like it's 80 to 100% the entire time. It's only 49% right around 9, but 62, 66, 49% there at 11 p.m. We know it's going to rain at some point, and likely for at least a quarter, maybe a quarter or half out of the game. And afterwards, you're still going to have some of the lingering effects due to the wet field. It's going to be a shit show, and the winds are going to be there the whole time, right? It's 12 to 25 miles an hour. Pretty much the entire time. In fact, it's a little bit worse here towards 11 p.m. where it's 13 to 26 miles an hour. That's going to impact downfield passing. So when we get into the player scripts, guys that are catching the ball closer to the line of scrimmage, i.e. your slot wide receiver, your tight ends, your running backs that are a little bit more pass heavy, are going to see a lot more usage in these sort of games. Your rushing attack in general, right? Teams are going to side towards the rush a little bit more than the pass in these sort of circumstances. And we already touched on the defenses too, which are also going to see a sizable boost. What we'll do now is we're going to hop over to the projections and talk through some of these players here. And a few guys that I'd like to touch on are the captains. So this slate is really going to come down to usage. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I've already said that I think that it's going to be an Atlanta win here, but I think it could be something like 17-7, 17-6, that sort of score where neither team can really get it going. And, obviously, scoring 17 points is no assured win, but that's what I see tonight, right? And if you're gonna have to pick a game script, right? This is for DraftKings. This isn't all about what I'm doing here. I'm going to give you guys, actionable advice out here. The chalky game script is going to be, relatively competitive game, right around the 41 point total. It's a 2.5 point spread. A lot of people look at the Vegas lines and, choose their script accordingly. I think that I agree with the lower scoring script, right? A 41 point total. In fact, I think it's probably going to go under that 41 point total. But I think the Falcons are just a better team. They're priced for the occasion, right? $11,800 for Cordarrelle Patterson. Let's see, Drake London is even $8,200. Kyle Pitts, $7,000. Their counterparts, first off, the running backs, right? $7,800, $5,800. They're way cheaper than the other side of the ball. DJ Moore, sure, he's expensive, but he's $9,200. He's not 11.8 like a Cordarrelle Patterson. So, I like the Falcons here. I think that they're the deserving favorite, but I have to consider the price here as well, which makes it an interesting little puzzle here. So we'll talk through it. The captains I like the most. I get the Marcus Mariota hype, right? He's going to be your highest owned captain, 15.5%. It's understandable. He probably should be your highest owned captain. He's going to be the head of that Falcons offense, the team that is the favorite here. I'm expecting them to win handedly, so that's only going to further support my love of Marcus Mariota. But he also brings rushing upside to the table. If he gets into the end zone on the ground, that's not going to guarantee him into the captain optimal. But maybe he's at the very least in the flex spot when it comes to the optimal lineup. And at $10,200, given some of the value we have down low, it's more than easy to fit in the lines. In fact, if you wanted to play these top three guys, Patterson, Mariota, and PJ Walker, might even be able to sneak in like a Terrence Marshall or somebody like maybe Chuba Hubbard for your cheap option there on the Panthers side and make a viable lineup. So it's not crazy. What is that like? And say even if you go to like DJ Moore, right? If you went to those four players, that's $40,000 of your $50,000, and you can fit your last two players in there, right? You can find one of these cheap kickers. You can get to another mid-tier option and round out a lineup, and you don't even need to go down to like these pure punts, like a Hodge, like an Ian Thomas that we'll talk about later. Shea Smith, who is probably my favorite play on the entire slate at $3,600. You don't even have to go that low in that sort of build. So, the pricing is a lot more, I should say, if you're willing to get to the Panthers, the pricing is soft. You can play all of these guys up top. The issue is if you're looking for Falcons players, like Falcons value, right? There's not much to speak of, right? The cheapest Falcons player that I'm playing, I mean, you have Gsluke, who's certainly in my player pool. Let's see. I guess Hodge, right? Hodge would be the cheapest player that I'm getting to. I considered playing somebody like a Parker Hess because he does get snaps. Avery Williams, receiving back for the Falcons, is going to see a snap from time to time, particularly if they're playing for way ahead, right? If we're playing like a 5-1 Falcon stack, I don't hate Avery Williams because he would be like your quote unquote junk time, garbage time back there for the Atlanta Falcons. There's not that much to speak of, right? Whereas, on the Panthers, if you're willing to take a few buybacks, cheaper plays like an Ian Thomas, you hope it scores a touchdown. Not really. You don't need a touchdown from Tommy Tremble. It'd be nice though to get it there at $3,200. There's just a lot more options. Like Shea Smith, we're going to talk about. I absolutely love. He's going to see a lot of usage, particularly if it's like nasty out. Like if we see high winds, they're not able to pass the ball far down the field. That plays directly into his skill set. He's like a slot guy, more of a gadget wide receiver, catches a lot of balls within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, if not behind the line of scrimmage. more of like a running back than anything out there. Those are the sort of guys that I like getting to. We got Doug down there who says, do you think these kickers are okay with the wind gusts? I'm below average on that. I don't like kickers to begin with. So I'll go ahead and say that to begin with here. I have them both in my player pool, but as of my last run, I had 15% Young Ho Koo. I actually had like 4% at captain. So I put a solid amount at captain, but not quite as much at the flex spot. So I have leverage at captain, but I'm under the field at flex. Eddie Pinheiro, I have 0 at captain and 5% at my flex. So I just have a little, bits and pieces of each of these kickers. You can play them independently. I'm okay with that. You can even get leverage to them if you'd like to. I worry about the wins, though. I'm personally not going to be there, but I wouldn't play both of them together. Let me just say that much. They're expensive, right? They're $4,200, $3,800. It's not like you're getting them at $3,000 like a Shea Smith, some of these other wide receivers that are going to play. Like we've seen it over the first like 8 or 9 weeks. They get legitimate playing time. Like they're not household names. We know why. They're shoddy plays at the very best. But yeah, I'm not a huge kicker guy. The wins do worry me, to answer your question there. Let's move on though. Let's get into this mid-tier range. So up top, like I'm not going to spend too much time. I love Mariota at captain. Some of these mid-tier options though are kind of what I'm looking for. So let's start up top. DJ Moore, like his down the play threat. I mean deep play threat. So like if we had no wins, DJ Moore would be one of my top plays on the slate. The issue is, I shouldn't say the issue, right? Like the issue with completely dismissing him because of the win narrative is that he has a great yards after catch ability. We've seen him take slants. We've seen him take jet sweeps, right? Running plays, take him to the house for 70, 80 yards. So I can't completely negate him for my player pool just because he's not going to be able to catch like a 60, 70-yard bomb like we saw a few weeks ago from PJ Walker. So $9,200, he's still at my captain pool, but I'm not going to have him in like 30, 40% of my lineups like I would before if we didn't have this whole like weather situation to worry about. So I'm okay with DJ Moore. I think he's okay at captain. He's not my favorite option. Terrence Marshall, I think he's a little bit sneakier. So he's way overpriced. There's no doubting that. Like that's clearly why his ownership is lower, right? He's 23% owned, 4.5% at captain. But we have enough value here where price shouldn't really take us off of place because Terrence Marshall is a similar guy to a DJ Moore where he's a big-bodied wide receiver. He can, catch balls deep down the field. He's not really going to be able to do that here, but he's also a big-bodied wide receiver who in the red zone can catch touchdowns. So if they're going to run the ball, move it down the field with Hubbard, Deonta Foreman, who we're going to talk about here in a second, love both of them as plays. In fact, Chuba Hubbard, I have him here at flex. I might even play him at captain, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Marshall, though, can catch that touchdown, right? He's that big-bodied wide receiver. It's not like you are going to be impacted by the wind by a 5-yard fade or a 5-yard slant route right into the end zone. I still think he has upside. And the fact that he's 4.5% owned, I mean, he's the lowest owned captain up top, just makes me it made me look at him, right? But then when I considered some of his red zone usage, the fact that, he is that big-bodied red zone threat, it's just a sneaky option I'm going to have to play, right? And he's 4.5% owned. Well, you play him in 10% of your 150 lineups. It's not really asking too much, right? It's not like you're playing him in 10, 15, 20. I'll try to say you are playing him in 10% of your lineups, but you're not playing him in like 20, 25% of your lineups and investing a quarter of your entire portfolio into him. Let's move on a little bit further. Drake London. In terms of like my favorite Falcons captains, I love Marcus Mariota. I'm probably going to have at least 30% of my lineups into him, maybe even like 35, 40%. So he's going to be a solid portion of that. Again, with DJ Moore, I have him at captain, but I'm pretty much matching the field. I'm not going crazy on him there. I'm not really taking a stand in either direction. But Drake London, I'm certainly taking a stand on. I'm going to have at least 15%, if not closer to like 20% captain. I think that he's, especially with this sort of weather, the wide receiver I want to get to, right? Like Cordarrelle Patterson, he's just too expensive. Like, I mean, I guess I should have mentioned that off the hop. Like, I like Cordarrelle Patterson, but at captain, he's $17,000, like nearly $18,000. We don't have to worry about price when they're like $8,000. And our average player out of our 6 players is like a little bit over $8,000, right? Like, we can live with that. We can't live with $17,000 Cordarrelle Patterson. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I'll play him at flex, right? If he burns me because of the optimal captain, so be it. It is what it is. It's just a ridiculous price tag. It really hinders the rest of your build. Drake London, on the other hand, he's only 12 grand at captain. And in this really shitty weather, he's going to be getting a lot of those short targets. That's kind of his MO, right? He can play on the outside. He has shown that ability, but he's getting a lot of targets over the middle half of the field, which is what you're going to be, what the quarterbacks at least are we're going to be looking for tonight. I mean, we're going to be hoping they throw it deep, but you're not going to see that very often tonight. D'Onta Foreman, Chuba, Hubbard, though, they're they're solid options at captain. I'd say I'd prefer Foreman just because Hubbard's playing time, Hubbard's availability is a little bit up in question. I mean, he's going to play tonight, right? We got that word about an hour ago, but we don't know how much he's going to play. That's the issue, right, with Chuba Hubbard. He's got a solid price tag, $5,800, way cheaper than he probably should be. D'Onta Foreman at $7,800, I think he's also cheaper than he probably should be. He's averaging over 5 yards a carry. He's been getting solid usage, particularly with Hubbard out of the lineup. And even if they have a little bit of a timeshare with this weather situation and how inefficient PJ Walker has been, I mean, you're going to see them getting maybe 30 carries, 35 carries collectively. They could both get there. Like, I'm not against playing them in the same lineup. Even if you're going with like an Atlanta heavy stack, I think that given how low scoring I'm projecting this game to be, I think you could have 3 running backs in your lineup tonight, and it could be the optimal. Like, you could have, let's say, Patterson, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you take, Tyler out. I can't even say his last name. I'm not going to try to. Tyler A for the Falcons there. It's like Algier or something, but every time I try to say it, I say it wrong. So I'm not going to try and fumble it over again. It's like Algier, but Algier, right? If you want to take him and then both running backs for the Carolina side, I'm okay with that. It's like one of the few slates, just because it's such a shit show. We have the weather situation that we have here, where I think that might be viable. And we'll talk about the defenses too, but I want to talk about Baker Mayfield. I just realized a second ago that I forgot to talk about Baker. We have to talk about PJ Walker potentially getting benched. It happened last week, and I just assumed, like when I woke up this morning and I looked at the pricing, I just assumed that Baker Mayfield was going to start for them. And I think a lot of people that watched last week, watched what happened to the Panthers when Baker Mayfield went in, probably would have agreed, as he outscored, who the hell did they play last week? They were playing some like juggernaut of a team they had absolutely no business competing with. In the first half, they were getting absolutely boat raced, and Baker Mayfield came in and outscored them in the second half. Now, he was playing against some second-team defenders. On offense, they took a few guys out as well. They were still trying to compete, though. They kept most of the starters in. Baker Mayfield brought him down the field for 3 touchdowns. I thought that would earn him the job, right? If he goes in there and, sparks the team in the second half, I mean, they were way out of hand. They weren't going to ever win that game. Why not start him next week? I didn't understand it. I may play Baker Mayfield at flex. I'm not going to put him at the captain spot. I don't understand why he's not starting. That's the issue, right? Like, if I was just coming into this game, it's like, oh, PJ Walker's playing pretty sorry, football at this point. Don't really need to have him in there because he's been extremely inefficient. They also have Sam Darnold, who I believe is active for tonight as well. The issue is, right, like, I want to play Baker, but Sam Darnold can end up playing. Let me look at this. Let me confirm this, because I saw someone earlier claiming that Sam Darnold was playing. I'm going to double check this for everyone here. If that's the case, right, it's like which quarterback would go in if PJ Walker ends up struggling tonight. So let's confirm this. I'm 99% sure that Sam Darnold's active. He is. He's $9,400. Your best guess is mine. Probably not Baker Mayfield. He played well last week. I mean, that's the only issue, right? Is you would expect that the person that came in last week absolutely tore it up for the last half of the game would get a little bit of a chance, but I guess not. I guess they're still going with PJ Walker. And now they have Sam Darnold active, who I thought was their guy, right? When he went down, he was injured. I know he had a little bit of a rough start there. He was the assumed starting quarterback, right? Now that, they're both struggling as backups, God, it could be any of the 3. And I don't like PJ Walker here. I'm playing him a little bit at flex. I have no interest at captain tonight. He looked so inefficient last week. He is absolute dog water when it comes to his stats. I cannot condone playing him, that's for sure. CJ says Baker Mayfield is trash starting, most likely going to bring him off the bench. Yeah, probably are. Well, think about it that way. You're right? He came in off the bench last week. He looked great. Maybe he's just got to have that chip on his shoulder. I don't know, man. I think I'm gonna play Baker in like 5-7% of my lineups. I think I'm just gonna like take a calculated risk, knowing that the lineups are probably dead. And I think I'm gonna play like 5% Darnold. Like, call me crazy on the whole Darnold thing. People may play Baker. They may play like 0.5% in some of these large field contests. Darnold's going to be 0.01% owned. And that 0.01% is probably going to be me, and maybe I'm a madman. Maybe I'm absolutely burning lineups. I could see either one of those two coming in. And again, Baker's probably the MO because he looked pretty good last week, or the heads up to go in that situation. But it's such a shit show. It's a fun slate. Let's just say that. If you're not willing to take calculated risks, I would say to sit the slate out. Like, I'm not going to condone playing the slate if you're somebody who has to play like extremely conservatively. If you're going to do that, play cash, right? And don't play any quarterback from the Panthers, right? Just stay clear. Play the running backs, right? Just stack a bunch of running backs and defenses and possession wide receivers and play cash tonight. You'll probably win just making a lineup like that. Doesn't even matter who use a captain. Use one of those like Drake Londons of the world or Donta Foreman, right? And you win all the money in cash tonight. If you want to play GPPs, right, you got to make these kind of moves because they happen every once in a while. I mean, think about it. When Tua got hurt, right, backup ended up coming in and being borderline optimal. We had last year, Derek Carr went down. He had an injury coming in. And then Marcus Mariota came in for him and ended up cracking the nuts in a millie maker. For these sort of slates, like, you should definitely be making those sort of moves because something's going to happen. It's just a shit show. Maybe it's a defense optimal. Maybe, and like normally I do not condone playing like Falcons or Panthers defense at the captain slot, but this might be the sort of slate to go out there and do so. Where's Panthers? Yeah, Panthers defense is too cheap. They're at $3,800. Like, first off, they're okay at flex. I don't love them tonight, but if you wanted to take them at captain, you can play pretty much everybody else up top. Just take all the possession guys. Probably not playing PJ Walker there, but take the Patterson, Mariotas of the world, and DJ Moore, and you can just. There's a lot of fun ways that you can play tonight's slate. Now, you don't have to do it like I am, right? I'm being a little bit more conservative. I'm going to leave salary on the table. I'm going to do it in that sort of fashion. But if you're going to get really wacky about it, right, like play a defense at captain, play kicker at captain. Let's say you think that the kickers are going to be fine in the wind, right? You're not buying, what I'm putting out about the weather, right? That the kickers aren't going to do very well. Then play them at captain. This is the sort of slate where that kind of thing goes off, like pops off, right? And if you're playing in one of these large field tournaments, it's the sort of slate to fire it off. Okay, that's all I'm going to say there. Something wacky is going to happen tonight. And again, I have no idea what that's going to be, but playing for it, right? Playing for the unexpected. Doug says, favorite cash captain, defense captain? No. So I would definitely not play a defensive captain. There's a little bit of a false preconception that defenses at captain or defenses in general are better for lower scoring games. That's not really the case. You're looking for turnover prone teams or quarterbacks that are prone to taking sacks. And quarterbacks that are prone to taking sacks are young quarterbacks. We know that. But furthermore, rushing quarterbacks, because they'll try to scramble to get out of trouble. And rather than throwing it away, a lot of times, they'll maybe rush or quote unquote rush for a 2-yard loss, and that's counted as a sack. Those are the type of situations that we attack. So when there's a chalky defense, like we see for a main slate every week, it's not really the low total games. I mean, those, they get ownership, right? They're not going to be like low owned, those lower scoring games. But your chalk defenses, like when defenses are especially tasty, are against a quarterback like PJ Walker, right? That's why Falcons defense, is $5,200. That's why they're a little bit more expensive. The Panthers defense going against Marcus Mariota, he hardly ever turns it over, right? So, if you're going to play the Panthers defense at captain, I would definitely say not to do that. I think that would be a little bit of I have no idea what I did there with the star. Sorry about that, Doug. But I wouldn't play them at captain. Probably wouldn't play, the Falcons defense either. I would stick to one of these mid-tier possession players. Donta Foreman makes so much sense because of his price tag. You could even play Chuba Hubbard if you wanted to, but a Foreman would be number one. Number two would probably be Drake London. DJ Moore is a little bit expensive, right? In cash, you're trying to save some salary, but it's what, 13.8 as opposed to like 12-3 or 11-7. Like you can probably make that work. So one of those three wide receivers would probably be my number one. Not wide receivers, there are two wide receivers, Donta Foreman there, or even a Chuba Hubbard. If Chuba Hubbard, if we get word, which we haven't gotten complete word on it yet, and he's not limited, he's 100% for tonight, going to play all his normal snaps, then he's especially viable because then he's the most mispriced player on the slate. And when we're trying to play cash, that's the exact sort of guy that we target, right? And his projection, by the way, if we got word that he's not limited, he'd go to like a 10-point projection. I mean, he's just going to get a ton of snaps. He's a receiving back. I mean, obviously the number one is Foreman. That's why he's projected for 12 points. But Hubbard brings a lot more PPR upside. So even in fewer snaps, he can still get there. So one of those guys. I'll give you gave you a few options there, but I think they're all viable. Let's talk about the value options. So we talked through the mid tier. Kyle Pitts is Kyle Pitts. He's disappointing to say the least for people that were excited about him, including myself. But yeah, don't play him at captain. I don't see him going out there and cracking the slate, but he still brings a lot of PPR upside. In a shitty weather game, he's especially viable because he's going to catch a lot of those targets over the middle. But yeah, I can't play him at captain. Tyler Algier, I like. We talked about Hubbard a ton already. Olamide Zaccheaus, I think he's worth a few looks, $5,400. He's on the side that I expect to win. So his implied just point total, touchdown total, is actually right on tier with guys like a Chuba Hubbard. So even though Hubbard's going to get a lot more snaps, Zaccheaus gets a lot more touchdown upside because they're, at least in my model, right? I'm projecting the Falcons to win this by a little bit more than a touchdown. I believe it was like a 10-point spread was the last run that I was using over there. I expect him to have a little bit more upside than most other projections. So I have him in my pool. Talked about the defenses. They're okay. Kickers, I might not even play. Talked about them. They might end up being fades for me come game time. Shea Smith, though. God, I wanted to talk about him for so much here. He's that little gadget player for the Panthers. I think he might end up cracking the slate. He's only 3,600, but I have him projected for 5 fantasy points. I mean, if he gets us to 8, 9 fantasy points, that's paying off a $3,000 price tag. If he gets us to 12, 15 points, you might have to have him at captain, right? Because, he was what is he, $5,400 at the captain slot? He could absolutely crack the slate. And, the weather helps him out, but he's already been a factor in this offense. He's already seen a lot of targets. If you watch this team, you know that he's an extremely talented player. I love him tonight. He's my favorite value pick by far. The one that I have the most exposure to, even though he's only 11% owned. When I'm comparing him to the kickers, right, I'm expecting them to have trouble with the wind. I'd much rather get to Shea Smith, right? So rather than playing like 40% of each kicker, trying to get leverage there, I mentioned getting leverage to Q at the captain slot, right? I'm being a little bit crazy with a few of my builds, right? With a kicker at captain. A majority of my flex exposure is going to be for these sort of players, like a Tommy Tremble. I'm okay with Ian Thomas. He's going to see a lot of snaps and is going to play in the red zone. Hodge on the other side of the ball for the Falcons. He's on the field occasionally. He's technically the wide receiver 3/number 4 for Atlanta. So if he can get, let's say, 20, 25% of the snaps, maybe he scores a touchdown, gets you a 30, 40-yard catch, that sort of thing. And he's cheap enough, right, where 4 or 5 fantasy points or a touchdown, which is closer to like 8, 9 fantasy points, can get us there in large field GBP. So he's viable. It's not my favorite play, but he's only 2.4% owned. So you put him in like 7, 10%, you're going to get some pretty solid leverage there. What we'll do now is actually going to build some lineups. This is probably the most important part of the video because we're going to talk through some game scripts, how I'm actually implementing them. Because we could talk about plays all day, it's sweet and all. We got to talk about how we're actually putting these lineups together. And I'm on the wrong contest figures, right? We had a golf up over here. Let's go over here to the NFL side. Let's see, there we go, Atlanta, Carolina. So we'll start with the cash lineup. So I know somebody asked about, my top cash captain before. Let's show you what like my cash core 4 would be, something like that. So let's start with a Drake London at captain. Let's go that direction. I like him, in that short yardage type of script. We're going to put Mariota in that sort of lineup. We're going to put DJ Moore in our cash lineup. We're going to put Foreman in. And we want at least one more pass catcher. for the Falcons. And I guess we'll make it a core 5 rather than a core 4. I guess Kyle Pitts. I mean, I hate Kyle Pitts, but in this sort of script, he's going to get a lot of targets. This is the kind of core I'd go with for cash, where you're taking one of those mid-tier wide receivers / running backs at captain. I think Mariota, you have to play him in cash. More Foreman and Pitts. I would avoid PJ Walker. So typically, go play both quarterbacks in your cash line. I'm normally always telling people to do so, but in this situation where Walker might get benched, you don't want to get shafted by that. So maybe just fade him, add in another top end option at the skill position, and round out your lineup with gosh, you can't afford Smith by $100. Well, let's make this work, right? Rather than taking him at captain, we're going to put Foreman. We're going to put London at flex. Oh, didn't do that correctly. Let's go here to captain. Let's put a Foreman at captain this time, London at flex instead, and you know who you can round out this lineup with, right? My favorite value pick on the entire board. That's what I would go with for cash. Any sort of iteration. Let's say you don't like DJ Moore. You think that his down the play threat is neutralized, which is a more than fair assessment. You can take him out of the lineup, put PJ Walker in, let's say, right? Maybe you like PJ Walker tonight. You can go in that direction. Let's say you want to take Cordarrelle Patterson. It's a little bit tough in cash. His price tag is extremely prohibitive. You're going to have to take 2 value picks, right? So you can put Smith in this lineup, but then you're at $4,500 to round it off. And Damiere Byrd, not really a safe play. These kickers, I think they could run into issues, right? Eddie Pinheiro is kicking for Carolina, not Zane Gonzalez. I don't know. I prefer that first build I went over than going to a Cordarrelle Patterson. He's just clearly a little bit overpriced. Now for GPPs, you got to be thinking a little bit differently, right? We got to get different here. Try and think a little bit outside the box. If you want to get different, just play a Carolina stack, right? Assume that they win this game. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, right? I'm not going to have many Carolina stacks, but I'll have a few mixed in. And in these sort of builds, I love playing both running backs. So if we take Foreman there, I'm still fine with taking Chuba Hubbard at $5,800. And even getting to, I guess, like a DJ Moore or Terrence Marshall. I would say DJ Moore just because I'm taking Foreman at captain. We're going to assume that Foreman's maybe scooping up the touchdowns. They're on a short yardage situation. And it's more yardage based, right? Where DJ Moore, I think, has more upside to get us like 60, 70 yards than Marshall Jr. That's a little bit more stiff, a little bit more of like a possession wide receiver than DJ Moore, who I have already explained is explosive after he gets the ball in his hands. So we can go with those 3 guys. We could take the the Panthers defense. I'm not the biggest fan because, again, Marcus Mariota doesn't turn it over very much. So I'm just going to take Smith instead, but you could take the Panthers defense if you don't have that same sort of narrative going against them. And now we're left with a bunch of money. So we can pretty much play whoever the heck we want here. Let's put Mariota in the lineup. I think that he's a slam dunk. We're left with $9,400. So we could make this a 5-1 stack, make it extremely different, or more than likely what I would do here, right, is make this, match somebody up with Mariota, right? I would go down to like a Drake London, a Kyle Pitts, leave some salary on the table. And though I'm taking a lot of chalky players, like Smith is still going to be like 10, 15% owned. If I'm leaving, let's say if I took Terrence Marshall Jr. here and left $1,100 on the table, that would be okay. But if I left $1,300 on the table, that's starting to get pretty unique there. And if we go down and leave $2,500 on the table, like Kyle Pitts, for example, if you went with this sort of lineup, you're more than likely going to be unique. And I think you're borderline optimal in terms of your build here. And you can go to a Drake London if you wanted to. You go with a 5-1 stack with somebody like a Terrence Marshall Jr. There's a lot that you could do here. And you can leave even more salary on the table if you wanted to and go down here to Zacchaeus, right? Leave $4,100 on the table. These sort of lineups you can enter in like the big 20 max, the 150 max tournaments. I think a lot of people have this false misconception that like you can't leave salary on the table. In NFL Showdown, there's no limit to the salary that you can leave. You can leave $4 or $5 grand on the table. Nothing's going to scare me as long as you have a game script in mind. Let's go through a few more builds here for the GPP perspective. So we had a little bit of a Carolina stack there. Let's talk about a few other builds you could go with. So let's be more traditional here, right? So the Carolina stack, it's going to differentiate itself just based on its construction. Not many people are going to go with like a 4-2 Carolina stack. Most people are going to stack up Mariota, right? Mariota is going to be our most owned captain. So if I'm taking Mariota at captain, how am I going to navigate that, right? How am I going to make sure that I'm not pinning myself into duplicating 100, 200 plus times, that sort of thing? So like Mariota, a lot of it to me here is about the buybacks, right? So we got to be a little bit outside the box, and this is where like a Hodge makes sense. So Hodge at $1,400, he was what, like 2.4% owned when we looked at the last sheet. Even if Mariota is going to be 15% at captain, well, only 2.4% of lineups are going to have Hodge, right? So that's a real quick way to get down our product ownership. So we could take Hodge there rather than Shea Smith as a value pick. We can go to somebody that's a little bit lower owned, like perhaps an Ian Thomas as one of our buybacks. Those sort of decisions are going to get us to a unique lineup while staying relatively close to the optimal. So let's take Mariota. We can actually take Cordarrelle Patterson here too, because of how cheap some of these differentiating options are as well. So let's take Patterson. Let's put a DJ Moore in this lineup. I like DJ Moore. And I guess we could take, like if you wanted to take PJ Walker here, you could. But I would probably take Ian Thomas. I would take DJ Moore. And then I would probably take somebody like Drake London, right? I would leave a little bit more salary on the table than most here. Round off my stack with Mariota because, right, like Patterson might end up scoring on the ground, but he does bring PPR upside. Hodge isn't going to be catching a majority of the balls today, right? He's more of a deep play threat than anything, maybe a red zone threat that gets us, 8-9 points that way. We still need that workhorse player for Marcus Mariota, right? So rather than taking a PJ Walker in this sort of lineup, I think that this would kind of be a dead lineup, right? At least if we're trying to build for the script we were imagining, right? Which is where the Falcons are going to win, right? This would be more of like my traditional lineup, kind of like the base game script that I was going with. Taking a lineup where you're leaving 2,100 on the table, you have a 2% owned Hodge. What is Ian Thomas's ownership? Let me check this out. Ian Thomas at 4.6% ownership. This is going to be a unique build. This is the exact sort of lineup that we're trying to build in these large field GPPs. So that's the whole point of going over some of these, hand builds, going through the thought process, that kind of thing. I'm playing in a 20 max tonight, and that's what I'm going to be doing for pretty much every single build. Let's go over to prize picks now, look at this board, and there's a brand new category they came out with. So what we're going to do here is actually make a slip live. You can see I have a free promo slip. This is on my ambassador account over there on prize picks, where they give me a few free entries. So that's why it says 0 and that kind of shit. But let's go through and let's find some props. If you have any fake props that you really like for tonight, feel free to go ahead and throw them down in chat, and maybe I'll add them to the slip, maybe not, right? I still got to like them if I'm going to add them to the slip, but I'm all ears at the very least. Let's go through these though. So these are kind of like the home run props like they had over there for MLB, right? Where they would group up sometimes 3, at times 4 players. And if they went over 0.5 home runs, you ended up hitting that sort of thing. I really like the idea here. And some of those matchups for the MLB side had a ton of value because it's not like they have sportsbook odds where they're able to compare to that sort of thing. It's all based on the prize picks projection. So they kind of nutted up here. They've added this category, which I love. And there's a few of them that I like. So first and foremost, this one over here, that's the Falcons stack. Like I was looking at it earlier. I was looking at this one. I was looking at the Kyle Pitts, Mariota, Zacchaeus stack too. A lot of these Falcons heavy over 0.5s, I'm considering adding. And I think the one that was really catching my attention was the first one here. I don't hate this one either. The Marcus Mariota touchdown, like I think he's going to score a touchdown. Probably like the last time I looked at my projections, like what my system was actually projecting, it was like 0.2 rushing touchdowns per game. Kyle Pitts is like another like 0.2 touchdown per game sort of guy. The ones where you have a lot of value are where like in a winning game script, like the Falcons, right? They're going to score a rushing touchdown. So like Caleb Huntley brings a bunch of touchdown upside. You still have Kyle Pitts there. Then Drake London, I absolutely love tonight. Like I think Drake London is getting into the end zone. I wouldn't bet him over 0.5 touchdowns, but I project him pretty close to half a touchdown on his own. So the fact that we're getting Huntley and Kyle Pitts on top of that really, really sides me towards the over there. But there's a few other ones we could consider. First off, you have the Algier Hubbard Kyle Pitts one. You know, that's not obviously all Atlanta players. It's a mixed bag with those two, but it's a pretty solid grouping there too. I like we have so many options, right? Like you would think that they would add these and there would only be like 3 or 4 groupings that you could go with, but they're giving us quite the platter here. Let's see if any other ones really stick out. That was the one I was looking at earlier when they first ended up dropping, but let's see what we've got. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably my favorite. These ones where it's 2, where it's like Foreman and Zacchaeus. Like I project Foreman for pretty close to half a touchdown. Algier, Huntley, and London. Like, oh, this one might actually be better, to be frank with you. So rather than Kyle Pitts, we get Algier here. Yeah, so no, I would rather take this one. I feel like a lot of people, maybe even the prize picks people themselves, would look at Algier and Huntley and be like, oh, wow, they negative correlate, right? Because they're on the same team. One of those running backs, those power running backs for Atlanta are going to score tonight. I'm feeling pretty good about Drake London too. I actually think that this grouping is a little bit better than the first one. So, hey, we're going to change that up. We're going to go with that grouping. Let's see. This Tremble Foreman one's not so bad. What do we got? Yeah, I don't hate that one at all, to be honest with you either. I'm not going to go with all of these props, obviously, right? We're going to go through some of the other categories. But hey, if there are any of those that you like down there, feel free to go ahead and enlighten me. I'm all ears. Let's go through some of the player-by-player props. By the way, like with the weather, like it's going to be under City, right? So, you know, they're at 155 yards, 160 yards. That's going to be a tough scene. I don't want to take an under there. In terms of rushing yards, Marcus Mariota overs, probably not the worst play. What is his last 5 looking like? Yeah, it's a bunch of green. You'd expect that. You'd expect him to run a little bit more because of the weather tonight. Let's look at PJ Walker. Yeah, he's toast. You're not betting a rushing yard prop or PJ Walker. You're probably it's probably not the move to go. But guys like Foreman here. So Foreman over is somebody I'm going to be taking for sure. We know that Chuba Hubbard's playing, but we don't know how much, right? So when you take a look at Foreman's recent usage, I mean, look at this, 118 yards, 118 yards. When he's getting 20, 25 carries, I mean, he's averaging over 5 yards per carry. It's going to result in well over 50 yards. So I like him here. Again, we're assuming that this is the huge Falcon stack over here. So it's not quite, a foul, it's not a game where I'm expecting him to get like 25 carries, 30 carries or anything like that. But he's going to get at least 10, even in a losing game script, probably closer to like 15 to 20 if they're in a winning affair. So I'm okay taking these 2 props together. If he was closer to like 75 yards, something a little bit more aggressive, I probably wouldn't be feeling that as much. Let's go over to receiving yards, see what we're working with over here. Yeah, so it's just such a slog fest through the air that I don't like taking many of these. If anything, I'd be taking some unders, probably, honestly, under. We already have Kyle Pitts on. Actually, we don't have Kyle Pitts on the card because we swapped him out for the Tyler Algier. Let's see, what is Kyle Pitts' fantasy score? 9. That might actually be the move in terms of a fade. Let's see what else we got on here. Patterson, 12.5. Yeah, this fantasy score might be the move in terms of fades. We're going to take Kyle Pitts and go under fantasy score. I think that he needs a touchdown to clear 9. I don't see him going out there and getting you like 7, 8 catches for like 70 yards, that sort of thing. He's just shown himself not to be that guy at this point. And then these kickers, I don't hate the unders on either. So do they have Pinheiro on here? Or they don't, right? So they don't even have Pinheiro on here because he's such a sorry kicker. Do they have him for like field goals made? No. Do they have him for kicker score? They do not. Okay, so I guess we could fade Young Hoku. I'm not actually. I think fading field goals made is probably even better. They're going to go for it on 4th. Like when they're in the 30s to 40s in terms of yardage, they're not going to be 100% confident. Yeah, let's take the under in Young Hoku there. And you need one more for the free. They make you do a 5 leg. There's slimy bastards over there. Maybe let's go over on punts. They do have them. They have that's the Atlantic punter though. See, if they had they do have the Carolina punter. This is money. I thought Johnny Hekker was still in the Rams. I overlooked him right away. We're nuking it for all the money. Good. You didn't see my screen there. We're nuking that for all the money. That's what we're gonna go with. I'll put the props back on there. I forgot I shouldn't have entered it. It's gonna bring up my whole page with my other props I've entered on Patreon that I don't want to share. But let's go with Hecker over. We did. Let's go through them all again. So the first one is the grouping down here of the 3 players. No, not that one. Algier, Huntley, and London. Where you at? There it is. Over. Rushing yards. Over. Then fantasy score. This is the card that we officially went with, right? So it was over on Johnny Hecker punts, over on that grouping of Algier, Huntley, and London, over on Foreman rushing yards, under on Pitt's fantasy score, and under on Young Ho Koo field goals made. So that's what we're going with. It's a 10x parlay. It's a little free $25 entry that you get for being an ambassador over there, and that's what I'm rolling with. So I have a lot of these independently on my other account. Most notably, I played a bunch of these, especially the ones that were Falcons heavy, right? So you had the one before that had Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Huntley. I had that mixed with Donta Foreman, just a 2-leg card. What else did I have in there? Young Ho Koo, I had under fantasy score. So I saw the under field goals made. I changed up my mind there because, like, fantasy score, they're going to, I mean, if he gets like a 50-yard field goal and then like 3 extra points, like, we're screwed on that. That's why I didn't like the 7.5 fantasy score quite as much. I did enter it earlier, so I guess I'll mention that. But the under on field goals seems a little bit safer because they're only going to kick field goals, I think, when they have to tonight. They're going to go for it if it's like fourth and third and 3, it's like 4th and 1. If they're within the 30 to 40 yard line, I think they're probably going to go for it too. Just I don't know. I don't think it's a super ideal situation for field goals tonight. And I wish they had the other guy up, right? I wish they had up Pinheiro for probably 1.5 field goals as well. I would slam the under on Pinheiro at that point. That is all I've got for the stream. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Yeah, the golf live stream we're doing tonight at 8 p.m. that I've got to get prepped for. Also, got to enter my 20 lineups here for this Thursday night football massacre. But best of luck with any of your prize pick slips, any lineups that you're entering for DFS. I'm going to try and make this a little bit more of a common thing here. When football and NFL got going, it was a lot more of a workload. I had to kind of scale back on things, but I figured out how to like streamline what I'm doing. I'm getting better at what we're doing here with the projections. So starting to be able to fit in more content. So, we have that Showdown stream tonight for golf. We're going to be doing more of these Showdown streams for football. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of them in the future. And I'll catch you guys next time.